Good afternoon, it's Dr. Alan Yim. This afternoon, I'm going to be talking about binary and ternary form. Binary and ternary form are 2- and 3-part forms that can be used to create short compositions. The idea of binary is something that is divided into two sections. So it could either be an A prime. A prime means that the second A has some variation at the end, or it could be A, B, and in this case B, the second section, will be something completely different. The sections are a little bit longer than just a phrase. Usually they contain 2 or 3, maybe more phrases. So we're not talking about period structure. As you might remember, period structure is 2 or more phrases that are related and they go together to make a section. And the last phrase always has the strongest of the cadences. Period structure and sentence structure can be in a binary or ternary form, but it's more useful to refer to those structures as period structure or maybe sentence structure rather than call them binary or ternary, which is more general. We have other ways of describing binary and ternary forms as well. We can call them sectional or continuous, depending on how each section ends. So in binary form, the first section ends with an authentic cadence in the starting key. So the section itself could be a little mini composition by itself because it begins and ends in the same key. In a continuous section, the key either changes, so it modulates, or the final cadence is something other than authentic. Maybe it's a half cadence or a deceptive cadence, which forces the music to continue on. You wouldn't end a piece on a half cadence normally, very rare. You certainly wouldn't end it on a deceptive cadence. So we call those continuous because the music still has to resolve. Let's take a look at a short piece of music. And I'm going to ask you, you will recognize this, is this a continuous or sectional binary form? So okay, this, of course, I hope you said, is sectional because it begins in the key of G and it ends in the key of G. You might notice that the composer here is not Bach. I always thought it was Bach because it was in the Anna Magdalena notebook and everybody said it was for Bach, written by Bach, but it turns out that Bach brought this piece back maybe from Dresden. In any case, it's not written by Bach, and it doesn't really sound like Bach either, so I'm not that surprised. Okay, how about this little minuet by Haydn? And then it repeats. Well, I hope you said this is continuous. What kind of a cadence is this? Well, you can hear that it's not ending where you expected. So it's a half cadence. And this is a continuous form. And it's binary. So to recognize that these two things are binary, well, there's two sections. This one happens to be A, and then it goes on. So it has two sections contrasting. This would be A, B. That's a binary form. You might notice the length of these two sections because we can call the two sections balanced or unbalanced based on their length. They're balanced if the two sections are about the same length. They're unbalanced if one section is longer than the other. Now, sometimes it might get a little close. One section might be 8 measures and the other one might be 6. So you might call that slightly unbalanced. If they're exactly the same, then obviously is definitely balanced. Now, both of the Bach and the Haydn are balanced. The Bach has, I called it Bach and it's not Bach. The Petzold has 16 bars in each section, and the Haydn has 10. So these are both balanced binary forms. So this minuet, you could tell, looks a little bit less balanced. The second section is much longer than the first. We can also see that it's continuous because it begins in A flat. And then it ends on a authentic cadence in the key of E flat, the dominant. Okay, so this one does modulate, and then it returns, and then it goes on. Okay, you might notice that both sections in this minuet are repeated, just like the ones that you saw before. This is a very common structure. We call this two-reprise. And maybe you want to call it two-reprise. That would be okay as well. There's a little bit of controversy over that word. Is it reprise or reprise? I don't really care. All I know is that both sections repeat. So we're going to call it two-reprise or two-reprise. Now, in a minuet like this, there are 3 sections. So I labeled this A, B, and A. So the B section is actually quite long. It's the same section, almost the same length as the A section. So it's in 3 parts, and I give you there 3 possibilities. A, B, A, very common. A, B, A prime, which means that the return of A is slightly varied, very common. A, B, C, well, not very common. I don't think you're going to see A, B, C in anything that we're looking at. But it's possible. Anything that has 3 sections like this, you can label as a ternary form. So I'll go ahead and play this. And what you might notice here is that the return to A is a little bit shorter than the original A. It's a little bit different. So I'm going to call this A prime. But this does look like 3 distinct sections. So we'll call it ternary. Whoops. Going on. Okay, that's not the entire minuet, but it's the first section of the minuet. And one thing to notice is that this is an A, B, A prime. The A prime isn't even exactly the same as the beginning, because the beginning, you know, and then when it comes back, but it's close enough that we definitely recognize that as A. Now you may ask about B. Why is B not A? Because it does begin, but it has a kind of a different feel. It has this. So it goes into a different texture. You notice the left hand rhythm is different. It's different enough that we should call this something else. So there are some gray areas when you're analyzing, and you may have arguments about with whether the form is binary, ternary, or what we're going to look at next, rounded binary. That's okay. There could be some ambiguity in some of these forms. And that's kind of the good thing, the pleasure of looking at music and recognizing how their things are same or maybe go outside of the boundaries. So let's take a look now, speaking of boundaries, and look at this rounded binary form. Okay, in this one, the B section is very short. It doesn't really stand on its own. And when A comes back, it's shorter. So it's not really the whole thing of A. Maybe it's half of A or part of A. But if you look at this, it's almost like a binary form in two sections rather than what we just looked at, which clearly the second part has, it's twice as long. It looks like there's two parts here rather than one in the second part. This one here, it's a lot more even. So let's see if this is a little bit gray, but let's see if you agree with me that this might be called rounded binary because the B section is so insignificant, and it's almost like we have an like this, just two parts here. I hope I can see this. Okay, this is a two reprise. Okay, so this is continuous. This is like A again, but it's cut off. Okay, so when A comes back, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, 7 and a little bit. So we don't get all of A when it comes back. I'm going to call this rounded binary. And I think the most difficult forms to distinguish are rounded binary versus ternary. But take a look at the B section and then see if when the A comes back, if it's complete or not. And those are really the two biggest clues, whether it's rounded binary or ternary. Okay, to wrap up this video, I'd like you to see an entire minuet and see that, in fact, the minuet itself is in a ternary form. So here is a complete minuet. It has two sections, but it comes back to the first section. So here I highlighted minuet da capo. It might say da capo by itself, which just means go back to the head, go back to the top of this thing, and then you play to the end. Now here it says fine. Where it says fine, that is the end, of course. So to perform this, you would repeat this section, the A section. You would repeat the B section, so it's two reprise. Then you go to the trio, the second section, and this is like a giant B, right? You play this, you repeat that. You play this, you repeat this section. Then you go back to the top of the minuet. You play the repeat of the big first minuet section, usually without the repeats. So that's the normal structure of a minuet. It's also oftentimes the structure of other kinds of dances. But as you can see, contained within the giant ternary form of the minuet are smaller binary and ternary forms. And then, of course, this movement itself is just one section of a usually 3 or 4 part sonata or symphony or some other larger structure work, string quartet, and so on. Well, I hope this sort of gives you a picture of how sectional music is. Though you may be hearing a long work that lasts anywhere from 10 to an hour, 10 minutes to an hour, those large works are broken down into smaller and smaller bits, all the way down to phrases. They're very highly structured, and it is really interesting to recognize this and it can really improve your ability to listen to this music and to recognize what's happening if you do understand the structure. Thanks for watching.